Work with Jack Guerrero.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute delight for me to be here with you this evening. As many of you know, Sacramento is broken, completely out of control, addicted to excessive taxation, over-regulation, and irresponsible spending. And now more than ever, we need to elect people that are competent and ethical and who agree to respect the United States Constitution. My name is Jack Guerrero. I'm a candidate for California State Treasurer. I'm delighted to be here this evening, and I wanted to introduce myself, my story, and work my way to the reasons and motivations why I'm seeking the position of California Treasurer. Let me start from the beginning. I was born and raised in a very small city called Cudahy in Los Angeles County, about 10 miles southeast of downtown Los Angeles. It's a city in a very troubled region. Working class, surrounded by corrupt government historically. It's a city right next to Bell. Everybody remembers the city of Bell, right? Where the city manager was paying himself $1.5 million a year in a town where the average income is $35,000 a year. A disgusting violation of the public trust. My former state senator, Ron Calderon, is now sitting in prison, in federal prison, for bribery and corruption. My own city experienced a corruption scandal several years ago, and 2 council members were indicted as well for corruption and similarly egregious practices. And so that's the region that I'm coming from. Again, a very troubled region, working class. My parents settled in the area in the 70s. I was born. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. My father was a bracero. Shortly after World War II, as many of you may recall, while our young men were off fighting the war in the Pacific and in Europe, there was a human capital labor shortage, and so the government sponsored a temporary guest worker program. My grandfather and my father were part of that program, and my father settled as a legal immigrant in the 70s. I was born in that environment. My parents were poor, working class, but they were good parents. I was raised in a Catholic home. My parents inculcated very good values: hard work, honesty, respect for elders, for women, to be a charitable person. Those are the values that my parents inculcated, and those formed the backbone of my conservative orientation. When I was 8 years old, I remember during the election of Ronald Reagan in his bid for the presidency against Walter Mondale, my 3rd grade teacher hosted a mock debate in the classroom. There was one young lady who advocated for Walter Mondale, and I was the advocate for Ronald Reagan. I remember her saying, "I am supporting Walter Mondale because my family is poor." And I responded, "I'm supporting Ronald Reagan because I don't want my family to be poor." And so from that day forward, I was 8 years old, I became a Republican because the party of Ronald Reagan was the party that offered hope, was the party of upward mobility. And even though I was a young boy, I knew that I did not want to live in a poverty-stricken environment, and I wanted a better life for my family. So I worked hard. When I was in high school, I became aware of the decrepit environment of my public school. It's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about education reform. It's one of the civil rights issues of our time, by the way, and Republicans have the moral high ground on education reform, by the way. We need to do a better job of advocating for that and letting working class people know that we are on their side when it comes to educating their children. When I was in high school, I realized that my high school was inadequate, and I am a product of a decrepit public education system, which is why I argue passionately for reform. When I was in 9th grade, I decided to enroll in the local community college to supplement my high school education. When I was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, I enrolled at the State University to take courses at night in math and other subjects. When I was a senior in high school, I was getting ready to go off to college. I was accepted to a number of universities on the East Coast, but I settled on Stanford University in the Bay Area because it was the cheapest university for me and my family. I was there on a full scholarship. It was cheaper to go to Stanford than to go to East Los Angeles Community College, so I went to Stanford. I studied economics, quantitative economics. During my 3rd year, I studied abroad at Oxford University, and I learned about the classical economist. I studied the history of economic thought. It was my foray into classical economics. I studied some of the Austrian economists. Frederick Hayek, for example, as well as other conservative economists like Milton Friedman, and it just opened my eyes to a philosophy of economics that I am now a subscriber to. After my time at Stanford University, I worked abroad. I was an assistant professor of economics at the University of Navarre in northern Spain. I then returned to California. I worked for one of the large global accounting firms, KPMG, in San Francisco. I was in their banking and finance practice, which meant that I was an auditor of large financial institutions, captive finance companies, mutual funds. I was with KPMG for 6 years, mostly in San Francisco, but also in Zurich, Switzerland, where I had one client, Credit Suisse Group, one of the largest banks in the world. I learned to speak German, and I had a wonderful time in Europe. I came back to California and decided that it was the right time for me to go back to school. So I went to Harvard. I obtained my MBA. During my summer, between my 2 years in the MBA program, I worked for the United States Department of the Treasury under President George W. Bush. After my MBA, I worked in New York for the American Express Company in a variety of finance roles, most recently in their merger and acquisitions unit in New York and London, back to New York. But like any good Hispanic kid, I couldn't be away from my family for too long, so I decided to come back to California. I worked for Ernst & Young in their merger and acquisitions due diligence group for many, many years, and then transitioned to Union Bank, where I now am the vice president of the corporate treasury department, and I work on economic stress tests for the Federal Reserve Board, and I also handle a number of financial reporting requirements for the Federal Reserve Board as well. But I also have another hat. I'm a public official. In 2013, I decided to run for the city council in my hometown, or as I tell my constituents, by day I'm Clark Kent and by night I'm Superman. But in 2013, there was a scandal in my city, very similar to Bell. Corrupt officials decided to take advantage of the taxpayer, and they were subsequently forced to resign. I waited to see if I could support a good candidate to step up to the plate. But I waited and I couldn't find good quality candidates. So I decided to step up to the plate and run for city council myself. In 2013, I was elected. I was the top vote getter. I became mayor immediately, and it was basically baptism through fire. I fired the city manager. I fired most of the staff. We started from scratch. And it was like playing SimCity in real life. I really enjoyed it, and we did a lot of things right from the start. I called on the state controller at the time, John Chung, and I asked for a forensic examination of the internal controls of my city. John Chung, who's now running for governor, ignored me. And so what I did is I went to the Los Angeles Times and I said, I want a forensic examination of my city, and I want it now. And so finally, with some press coverage, John Chung decided to come to my city and finally audit the financial controls of my community, and it exposed all kinds of mismanagement. I am known in my region as the anti-corruption activist, and no finance director can pass a fast one on me. You can believe that. Take that to the bank. I was mayor and council member for a number of years. I did things that people discouraged me from doing, like holding public hearings on the quality of education in my city. I had people tell me, Jack, you're not a school board member. You're a city council member. Stay away from the school issue. But there was a school in my city that was failing the parents, and it was failing the kids. And I could not sit idly by long enough, and I decided that I needed to speak up. So I held a public hearing on the quality of education in my city, if you can believe that. I ruffled a lot of feathers, but my efforts led to the wholesale change of an administration in one of the local schools, and I'm very proud of that effort in collaboration with the parents. In 2017, I decided to seek re-election to the city council. By then, I had ruffled enough feathers to the point where my liberal state assemblyman and my liberal state senator have both unfriended me on Facebook. I think I'm the only elected official in California to have that distinction. But I got attacked viciously, as you can imagine. The entire political establishment, the liberal political establishment, was out to take me down. And so I had 7 attack mailers against me. They all centered on the Republican theme. I was linked to Donald Trump. Of course, I gave it to them on a silver platter because I went to the Donald Trump inauguration and took a lot of pictures. And so I made it very easy for my opponents to attack me. But they thought they could just take me out by linking me to the Republican brand. and accusing me of all kinds of extremist and radical ideas. I remember one flyer had a picture of me on the front, and it said, "Why do working people, nurses, fill in the blank, oppose Jack Guerrero?" And then you turn the flyer over, and it had the same picture with the word Republican stamped across my face in gritty block letters. And I thought to myself, if that's the best they can do, I'm doing pretty good. And I'm happy to report that in a town that is 96% Hispanic and only 11% Republican, I was the top vote getter in the recorded history of my city. I'm very proud of that. And I want that to be a testament that Republicans can win, even in deep blue communities. We have the moral high ground on a lot of issues that resonate with working people and that resonate in the Hispanic community like the one I come from. Education reform, low taxes. My own city at one point had excessive regulation telling private property owners what they can do and where they can park. And that kind of onerous local municipal policy is excessive and needs to be curtailed. And so I appealed to working people in my community, and they delivered their confidence to me, and I'm very proud of that record. So now I'm seeking the position of California State Treasurer. I think what I bring to the table is a unique combination of both private sector experience, I know Treasury and finance, and I bring the public sector experience as a mayor, as an elected official, as a city council member that has won election in a deep blue community. And so I think that that combination of both public and private positions me favorably for this race. I think that we have a number of problems in the state of California that the treasurer has direct responsibility for addressing. For example, the treasurer sits on numerous boards, including CalSTRS and CalPERS. These are the large public pension boards. And I have to tell you, right now, all of those boards are biased boards because they are all represented by the public sector unions. And I have nothing against hardworking public sector workers. I respect a lot of them. But they have been lied to by our government about the sustainability of these excessive pension schemes. And it's unfair to the taxpayer and it's unfair to the retiree. At the moment, my personal estimation is that the present value of the unfunded obligation is about $500 billion. That is my personal calculation. I used to be a pension auditor. I'm an economist. I know what I'm doing when I calculate these values, and I think that that is a reasonable calculation. But the Stanford University Economics Research Institute recently published an article saying that that amount, that unfunded obligation, could probably be closer to $1 trillion. Think about that. For perspective, the size of the general fund in the state of California is $100 billion. So we potentially have a hole that is 10 times the size of the general fund. That means that we couldn't even tax you 10 times over and recover from this liability. That is going to be a problem, and it's going to be a problem very soon. And it's going to have profound implications for the ability of the state and local municipalities to provide service to constituents. And I'm really worried about that. And we need a treasurer who can be objective and fair and balanced and deliver the truth to these boards and to the taxpayers. But in addition to that, I intend to use the bully pulpit of the treasurer to bring objectivity to the legislature. I am not an assemblyman or a state senator, and I don't have authority over the legislation of the state, but you better believe that if I'm treasurer, I am going to be sitting on those committee meetings with the Assembly and the Senate, and I am going to expose the mismanagement of the liberal establishment when it comes to the management of our finances. So I'm committed to safeguarding state assets, and I'm committing myself to delivering the truth about our financial condition and our ability to deliver to the taxpayer. And so that's my basic platform. Before I open it up to questions, I just want to remind everybody that the revolution is coming, and I don't want you to start without me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.